Hi guys, so today I'm just going to quickly give you an overview of the Horus ePortfolio. So this is what you'll use as your portfolio for foundation years. I remember when I started foundation, no one really explained it to me, so I'm hoping this will hopefully clear some things up, and I will try and answer questions if people leave them in the comments. So this is hopefully just to give you an understanding of the basic layout of a Horus portfolio, understand the main forms on it, and a little bit about which areas you can be targeting in psychiatry if you have that as a placement, just because that's where I'm based now. So this is kind of the home screen that you'll come and land onto when you log onto your Horus portfolio. At first it feels really overwhelming, but don't worry, within a few months you'll know where everything is and where to find it all. So the mandatory forms for each placement to be aware of are the initial meeting with your ES, so that's your educational supervisor, and you need to do an initial meeting with your clinical supervisor as well. For your first block, that's normally the same person, so you'll probably only have to do one. You need to do PDP, so personal development plan, and that's one that you have to fill in by yourself, but you might discuss it with your supervisors. And I'll go into more detail about that later. And then there's a end of placement report from your clinical supervisor as well. The educational supervisor's end of placement report is just one at the end of the year. So mandatory forms for the whole year, you have to upload your PSA and F1. So just make sure you've uploaded your PSA certificate that you've passed. You need to have done at least one tab, but again, check with your trust because the one that I was at wanted me to do two. PSG, we'll go into that. But that's kind of like a feedback form that your consultant supervisors have to send out, so you might need to remind them to do that. You need to have done a QI project or at least been involved in a QI project, and you need to fill in a Form R. So that's where you have to keep track of your sick days and any strike days that happen. So the picture on the left, you can see the different areas that you might need to fill in. So just keep a track of those. I used to keep a note on my phone, and then you can fill it in really quickly at the end if you've kept a note as you go along. So the HLOs are basically the learning objectives. So they're displayed in each section of the portfolio, and again, that'll make more sense when you log into it. And they're broken down into three FPCs, so Foundation Professional Capabilities. The HLOs are what you need to be mapping all the forms that you fill into. So your kind of workplace-based assessments and your reflections, all of those need to be mapping to your HLOs. It's really good to read through them, be really familiar with them, so that you can notice when a situation arises that you'd be able to create a good workplace-based assessment for. And also it means that when you're writing your reflections and your workplace-based assessments, that you're thinking about your HLOs and kind of writing explicitly about them so that again you can link it and it makes sense about why you've linked it. Within Foundation Year 1, you need to have done at least one mental health-based, workplace-based assessment. So whether that's a case-based discussion or a mini KEX, it doesn't matter, but you need to have at least done one thing about mental health. So these are examples of some of the HLOs, all three. So it's under three main sections, which then have a breakdown within them. So it's just about making sure that you have an idea what all of these are and that you're working towards them throughout the year so that by the end of the year you've covered all of them. So your PDP, this is your kind of plan in each placement about what you want to achieve. You normally, like I said, you'll discuss this with your supervisor and make a plan about what you're wanting to do, how you're going to achieve it. The good news is that if you get to like the last 4 weeks of your rotation, you realize actually I've not managed to get that one done and I'm not getting it done. It's okay because you can edit them until you mark it as complete. So you can take that one out and change it out for something that maybe you have done and didn't know that you were going to be able to do. At the end of the placement, to prove that you have completed them, you need to link your workplace-based assessments, so like your CBDs and things, as evidence that you've achieved them, and you write like a little summary about it. So, for example, this was one of the personal development plans that I did during foundation years. So you can see here, I've said what placement it is, I've said where I am, I've said what development needs do I have, how I'm going to do them, the timescale, which is basically by the end of the rotation, and then the outcome and evaluation, that's where I've written kind of how I achieved those things. So I've said I've independently assessed patients, and I've said I've linked mini KEX, I've done shadowing, and I've attended teaching and conferences. And then I've linked that form, you can see at the very end, to different things to show people that how I've achieved my PDP. So a mini KEX records a patient foundation doctor encounter and it's observed by a doctor. So it has to be observed by the senior who's signing you off. It can be history taking, could be an assessment, could be ward round, could be clinic, could be clerking, could be conducting a procedure. And it can also be calling a relative to either give them an update or ask for collateral. So that's a really good one as well. Sometimes if a senior is really busy, you might need to send them several emails to remind them to sign it off. And again, like I was saying at the beginning, think about your HLOs and how you can map them to your HLOs when you're doing it. So this is an example of a mini KEX. I'm not going to read through the whole thing, but you can pause it and have a read through if you like. So a CBD is a structured discussion for teaching purposes. So this is basically when you've gone and you've seen a patient and then you discuss it afterwards with a senior. It's not as good evidence as a mini KEX, but it's still good evidence and you should try and do as many as you can. And same as before, think about what HLOs you're trying to link the scenario to when you're writing it and keep an eye out for situations which would be good to discuss because they map with the HLOs. And again, this is an example of a CBD, so you're welcome to pause and have a read of this again. So a DCT, this is the developing the clinical teaching basically. So it's any teaching that you do. It can be formal teaching organized by the university or your education department, or it can kind of just be informal teaching that you do with students on a ward round. So you need to make sure there's a senior who's seeing you teach and try and get them to agree to give you feedback beforehand. If you find you're really struggling for it, it's a really good idea to get in touch with either the university or the education fellows that are affiliated with the hospital that you're at, so you can try and arrange some teaching like that. And then this is an example of a DCT form. Again, you can read through this in your own time. And ADOPS is a direct observed clinical skills. This is anything that you do. In psych specifically, there are bloods, ECG, MSEs, that's the mental state exam, ECT, letters, capacity assessments, but depending the rotation that you're in, depends the DOPS that you'll be able to get done. Maybe it's, an ABG, or it's a FEMSTAB, or, maybe you did the pacing in a cardiac arrest scenario, whatever it is. Try and ask a senior at the time if they can sign you off for that. And a tab is similar to the PSG. So these are basically both feedback forms. You are the one who has to start the tab. So you need to collect colleagues' emails, ask them if you can send it and send it to them. Start thinking far in advance. You need to make sure you get enough respondents because even if you're one short, the whole thing won't count. You might need to send several reminder emails and remind people in person because it's often not their top priority. And you can use other foundation doctors in the allied health section, but you're not allowed to use more than two. And you need to have other allied health professionals as well. So here you can see you need a total of 10. You need to have at least two consultants or GPs. You need a doctor who's more senior than an F2. You need two nurses and other people, two allied health professionals. So that could be other team members, that could be OTs, that could be physios, that could be ward clerks, that could be a receptionist, that could be a support worker. It's a really pharmacist, loads of different people, and foundation doctors, like we said, needs to come to a total of at least 10. So your personal learning log is where you log the hours of teaching that you've done. You need a minimum of 60 hours per year. 30 of it needs to be the foundation teaching that is mandatory for you and you'll be attending either every week or every other week, depending how your trust works. And the rest of it, if you need to make it up, can be teaching that happens within the department that you're in, the lunchtime teaching. If you're in psych, you might be able to go to a Balint group and that can count. Your trust might do grand rounds or you might be able to attend them virtually if you're part of societies and organisations. And then e-learning modules can count as well if you're really struggling. So the PSG is another feedback form. It's the consultant on the rotation who has to open that for you and has to nominate and send the emails. So you probably need to remind them to do that and you don't want them to leave it to the last minute. It's good to complete in your initial placement, similar as the tab, because then if there are any problems, you can repeat it again and hopefully it's better and then you can show improvement. So reflections are a really good thing to bulk out your portfolio, and there are lots of things that you can reflect on. Kind of common themes are work-life balance, adjusting to starting working, if you've had to raise any concerns, things around sleep with shift patterns, and also if you kind of have any complaints or make any prescribing errors or anything like that, it's good to write a reflection about that. Try and write a reflection thinking about the HLOs and mapping it to that. Some foundation schools have a minimum number of reflections that they require, so you need to figure out if that is the case at your foundation school and make sure that you reach that. And if you do decide that you need to complete any e-learning to make up your teaching hours, you need to write a reflection for each e-learning module that you do, and you'll have to link them. So the curriculum summary narrative is on your portfolio in the space between the HLO and where you've put all of your evidence. And it's basically kind of like a little spiel about how you've said that you've reached that HLO. So you discuss your evidence, your CBDs, your reflections, your mini kexes, and how those things mean that you've met the HLOs. I would draft it in Word first because they're actually really hard to write and there's a really strict character limit. So you don't want to get it and then for your web browser to crash and you used to lose the whole thing. So I would definitely draft it in Word first. And then please do let me know in the comments if you have anything else that you're wanting to know about or ask, and I will really do my best to try and answer.